Well, it's another good morning here working on our communication skills. Um, Hope you finished the other one fine and you're learning to be a better listener. Part of the other portion is learning to be a good speaker. Now, the EQ for this is why do people fear public speaking? Now, let me be upfront with you. I have always been a public speaker. I remember even as a young child, they would put me up and had no problem talking to people. I just didn't have that fear. Now, I'm not saying I don't get nervous, because yes, I do get nervous, especially when I'm speaking to a large crowd or a crowd who is very knowledgeable on the subject. But here's one thing I learned. Guess who got asked to speak? It was me. They asked me to speak. That means they want to hear what I have to say. And if you've done a research paper or something like that and you're being asked to speak on it, guess who's the expert? You are. So relax, tell them what you know, and you're going to do fine. Now, one of the things I've learned about public speaking is you have to just go and say, here are my notes. I have them together. Now, believe it or not, right back over here, I've got some notes that I'm working from because I always leave notes so I make certain I know what I'm going to say. So have your notes together. Make certain that you've got the things that you're prepared. So let's start with that. The first thing you need to know as a public speaker is be prepared. Now, I know that that sounds crazy because, well, why wouldn't I speak that? Now, I had a friend of mine. He was actually the president of the seminary that I went to. I was involved in this huge luncheon, and the speaker, their mother was rushed to the hospital, and so they went to the hospital with him. And so here we are having dinner, and now we learn the speaker's not there. And this group came to me because I knew them all. They said, "What do we do?" And I said, "See that man sitting up there next to you? Go ask him." Now he was having his salad. That's where he was in his meal. He was just starting his salad, and they went, "Really?" I said, "Go speak to him. He'll do a great job. Just watch." Well, so in the course of going and speaking to him, from the salad through the dessert, he put together a message. Now the good thing is he is a speaker. That's what he does, and so he was able to put together some thoughts to prepare some ideas so he knew where he could think. And so he was sitting there scratching, writing out on his napkin. He didn't just stand up in what we call extemporaneous speaking. Extemporaneous still has some preparation. So be prepared. Afterwards, people said, "Oh my word, that was the best speech." Well, he was able to pull things together that he already knew. He was prepared in other ways and just put it together into something that worked. That's part of that being prepared. So for you, anytime you speak, have to stand up and speak, you ought to be prepared. Some notes, you've written the project, whatever it is, you are the one who's prepared. So don't be scared. The other people aren't prepared. All right. So that's our first thing I want you to know. First of all, be prepared. The other thing is always speak slowly. Put an A in there. And the problem is we get too anxious. And so we start talking like this and we try to get all the information because I want to hurry up and sit down. Well, as a communicator, people don't hear that. All they hear is, and they didn't get anything. And your job is to help them understand. Now, I admit the first time that I spoke in a more professional way, and I had to really slow myself down, because I do get excited. And man, I'll start talking. You've heard me do it. And so we've got to slow down so people can hear us. And so if you're going, "Golly, Mr. Marks, you're talking real slow right now," the answer is yes. I'm doing it on purpose because I want you to get this message and I want you to hear it, because we can't interact. You can't say, "Hey, Mr. Marks, what does that mean?" We don't have that opportunity. But I do. If you have a question, send me a text or send me a note on the Google Classroom and I'll answer it. Slow down. Let people hear what you have to say. It also goes with use good grammar. And you think, "Oh, Mr. Marks, is good grammar that important?" Absolutely, it's important. That's one of the reasons why I stress in my classes, especially my English classes, is I want you to use good grammar because people will hear. And when you make the mistake, they go, "Are you really educated?" Should you really be speaking? And the answer is yes, you are educated. Now, I might use one type of language hanging with my friends and another when I'm speaking publicly. And that's okay. But I need to remember, I need to leave the friend vocabulary over here in grammar and come to a more intellectual, a clearer grammar based, so that I say it right. Okay. I always laugh. When we were in Louisiana, one of the things they always say was where you was. I went, where you was? They were asking, where were you? And to me, it sounded like you don't have an education at all, because you don't know that's the wrong verb for what you're trying to say. Don't be like that. Instead, use correct grammar. And that may mean you need to write down what you're going to say. So you use the right grammar and say exactly what you want to say. Now, the other thing is, back to this being prepared, think about what you're going to say before you say it. And so when you think about it, you've put some ideas together, you've done that preparation, you get it. Sometimes we need to really think about, and maybe even practice, how did I say that? Record it, just like I'm doing now. When I first started speaking professionally, I would record it. I would stand in front of a new mirror, I would record it, I would do all those things so that I could hear it back. What did I say, and did people understand it? And so that's a real important piece here. Make certain that you've thought about it and that you know what you're going to say. And if there's a particular phrase you want them to hear, something important, make certain you have it written down so you say it word for word, exactly the way you want it to be heard and the way you want it to be understood. Okay? Another thing is avoid, like, we do that one all the time, don't we? We use this as a filler because our mind is trying to track, and what am I going to say next, and all those kinds of things. The truth is, if we've practiced, if we've prepared, if we thought about what we're going to say, those uhs and like and all those kind of stumbling words disappear. And that's what we want. We want to communicate clearly. And so with that, we've got to be able to take out those uhs, those things we do. Now, one way to do that is speak in front of somebody and have them just mark them down. We used to do that all the time with public speakers. When I taught a communication class, I kept up with little ticks, 1, 2, 3. How many times did you say like? How many times did you say And so we're just going along, and afterwards I go, look, that's how many times you use those words. They're like, I didn't know that. You're right, you don't hear it. So maybe you need to get someone listening to record it before you have to speak. All right, the next thing I want you to know is no profanity. Now, you've never heard me use profanity. First of all, we're in a school. I wouldn't do that. Second of all, I don't speak that way. I don't use profanity, and so I'm not going to. But a lot of people think, oh, well, I mean, it's cool that I'm trying to be, I'm trying to be important. Well, you know what? I think that if all you can use is a 4-letter word, you don't have a very large vocabulary. And so profanity does not fit, especially stop and think about in a business situation. You're talking to a client, you're introducing something, you're speaking to them. Profanity turns more people off than on. Turns more people, there we go, I messed that one up. Turns more people off than it does on. My wife's forever sitting in a meeting or something, and my daughter too, and she sits in some really big meetings, and she'll hear somebody just cussing up a storm, and she doesn't cuss. And it's like, just say it. Don't use the profanity. It just doesn't help anyone. All right? Always pronounce your words clearly. Now, there are words that you may need to practice. But if you stop and pronounce them clearly, then people are going to hear it. Now, teaching from the Bible all the time, there are all those wonderful names from the Old Testament. And so I practice them. I make certain I know what it says. So when I get to that, I pronounce it clearly and people go, oh, that's how you pronounce that. And so we want to be able to do that. Okay? So pronounce your words, practice them. Okay, a couple of things. Hopefully you've got all these. If you need to stop the button, that's fine. I'm going to just hang 1 second. I'm going to stop and erase and go to our next thing. Okay, clean the board up so we can finish up. I just have this little board at home that I'm working with, so forgive me. All right, so here's how to do it. The first thing I want you to do is start with some kind of an introduction. So how do we speak? So here's our how-to. First, we're going to start with an introduction. Now, if you were writing a paper, you're going to start with some kind of an introduction. We call that a hook. So we can do that. We can call it a hook. That's easy enough. Our hook gets people excited about it, or at least gets people listening. So we want to start with a hook, get with something. A lot of people tell a funny story. A lot of people throw out some, in writing hook, some 30,000 people have died from swallowing a toothpick. And you go, oh, but you begin to listen. It's that thing that turns them on. So you want to begin with an introduction. Maybe the people have no concept of what you're going to be talking about. So we're going to begin with an introduction. And if we were writing it, we'd have our thesis in here. And our thesis is nothing but telling them what we're going to tell them. Now, the way to communicate, the way to speak, is tell them what you're going to tell them, thesis, tell them what you want them to know, and remind them. We're going to get to that. So I'm going to have my introduction. Maybe you need to tell who you are, why you're qualified to speak. I've done all this research on this particular topic, so I'm going to share it with you. I thought it was exciting, and so you give all this research and begin. So begin with our introduction. The next thing you need to do is you need to move to the body of your work, and that ought to be telling all the information you need. So tell them what you want them to know. Now, by telling them what you want them to know, you might be doing things like, there we go. You might be doing things like, well, let's first describe what pollution looks like. And so as we begin to look at this pollution problem, and pollution is caused by plastic in the oceans and all of those things. And so you might describe it, and then you might move on to how plastic is made, because it's made with these particular things that don't break down. And so it creates that pollution. And then there are people who just allow that pollution, that plastic, they just throw it out of the car, and then it gets into our waters. And then when it gets in the water, it doesn't go away. It's in there. And so it gets stuck around duck necks and around fish and all the turtles. And so we begin to tell them in some kind of logical order. And so we tell them what we want them to know. Give them all the facts, the information, all that research you've done. And you want to make certain that you're speaking at a speed that they get it. So I'm going to tell them what I want to know. So I told them what I wanted them to learn in our thesis. I'm now telling them what I wanted them to learn. And then my conclusion reminds them, I can't spell this morning. What else is new? Reminds them what you wanted to know. So I told them what I was going to tell them. I'm telling them, now I'm reminding them of what I told them. Now, so I've told you 3 times what I want you to learn. When your parents ask you to take out the trash, how many times does it take? The first time? I bet not. It takes about 3 times. Well, in speaking, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to put together an introduction, tell them what we're going to tell them. Then we're going to tell them all about it. We're going to give them all the details and all that stuff and make certain it's not drawing like this, that you put some emotion and all that into it. And then in conclusion, you're going to tell them what you wanted them to know. All right. I'm going to put another article out for you to look at, kind of do the same thing with. Y'all have a wonderful day.